Outraged by Ashley Dotty Charles is a fantastic book about outrage, as it says on the tin, but particularly about the culture of outrage, particularly in the age of social media, and how the public writ large tends to be outraged about certain things at the expense of being outraged with a sense of direction. She argues explicitly throughout the book that outrage is fine, it's a perfectly good thing to have, it's a perfect weapon to use, a good tool, but it needs to be focused, driven. You need to have an end goal in mind. And she examines a number of cases of recent outrage, from Rachel Dolezal to Piers Morgan to Katie Hopkins. She even talks to Katie Hopkins and other people about this outrage, and she talks about groups like Stop Funding Hate, who have successfully lobbied major corporations to pull their advertising from media outlets that sponsor and that put out hateful articles that are homophobic, misogynistic, that are racist. And she says that this is a good example of directed outrage. Stop Funding Hate have seen a problem, they've got outraged about it, and they've actually taken steps. They've actually used social media and used their outrage as a weapon to achieve a goal. So the argument in this book is that you should aim for something. Don't just get outraged because Rachel Dolezal, made herself look black. Don't just get outraged because Katie Hopkins said something outrageous, because ultimately there is a market for outrage, and people like Katie Hopkins, Alan Sugar, Piers Morgan, to some of them to a degree more than others, they trade in that. That is their whole thing. Katie Hopkins would be nobody if it wasn't for people being outraged by the things that she says, and she has realised this. In fact, Katie Hopkins as much as admits it in the interview she did for this book, that if you can say something and people can get outraged by it and you can become famous, it becomes a commodity. And we are cheapening outrage by being offended by the slightest thing that Katie Hopkins says or Piers Morgan says or Alan Sugar says, than not actual systemic injustices. So if you're going to get outraged that Rachel Dolezal made herself look black for a number of years and believes herself to be black, if you're going to be outraged at that, then you should really be thinking about, shouldn't you be more outraged at the fact that black people are 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched in the UK for drugs? Shouldn't you be outraged at the fact that they are more likely to die in police custody, that they get longer sentences for the same crimes as their white peers? These are the things that you should be outraged about. If you're going to be outraged that Piers Morgan made some off-the-cuff offensive remarks about trans people, you should be more outraged at the fact that to be trans in 50 states in America, I think it's 50 states. No, there is 50 states in 40-something states in America. They have a trans panic clause where you can legally kill a trans person, and it's a legal defence to say that you panicked because you thought they were transgender. That's an actual law. You should be offended or outraged that in most countries being gay is still illegal. In many countries, being transgender is still illegal and it's still legally persecutable. These are the things that Ashley Dotty Charles is saying you should be focusing on, not the cheap commodity of outrage, because outrage fads seem to come and go. You can just pop onto Twitter and see it yourself. They come and they go. One week you'll be offended by something Piers Morgan said or Katie Hopkins said, or you'll be offended at something that Lawrence Fox has said. The next week, everyone's forgotten about it. So if we're going to be outraged, which is a fine thing to be, it's a good thing to be. Outrage, after all, as the author says in the book, gave us the Montgomery bus boycotts, gave us the Stonewall riots, gave us all these kind of progressive things throughout history. But in the age of social media, it's become cheap, and that we should be outraged by much more worthy causes, much more worthy things, and we should use that outrage to have a direction. Go ahead and download it. I downloaded it on Audible. It was only about 3.5 hour listen. Very, very worth a listen, very much worth a read. It will have you questioning your interactions on social media. God knows it did me. So go ahead, download it, give it a listen. Very enjoyable, very thought-provoking, very nuanced.